The doctor said I was unresponsive, a body waiting to die, but I heard every word, especially my husband's whisper, promising to finish the job. The first thing you get used to is the sound. It's not the frantic beeping you see in movies when someone is coding. It's a steady, rhythmic beep, beep, beep that syncs up with a gentle, mechanical whoosh. The beep is my heart. The whoosh is my lungs. They aren't really mine anymore, not completely. They're outsourced projects, managed by a bank of machines that hum and glow in the periphery of my vision. My vision, well, that's mostly the acoustic tiles of the ceiling, a Monet painting of water stains, and the blurry upside-down faces of doctors and nurses who talk about me like I'm a piece of faulty equipment. Minimal brainstem activity, one said. Prognosis is grim, said another. They don't know that I hear every word. I am here. I am screaming, but the sound is trapped somewhere between my brain and my useless vocal cords. A prisoner in the wreckage of my own body. Locked in syndrome. That's what they call it. My mind is a pristine, untouched room, but every door and window has been welded shut. The accident was stupid, mundane. It was a Tuesday. Mark and I were on our way to look at a little cottage by the lake, the one we'd been saving for. He was driving. I was navigating, teasing him about his terrible taste in music. He just put on some 80s power ballad, and I was making a big show of plugging my ears. He laughed, that big booming laugh that made me fall in love with him in the first place, and reached over to tickle my side. For a split second, his eyes left the road. That's all it took. A flash of silver from a side street, the ungodly screech of tires, and then the world became a kaleidoscope of shattering glass and collapsing metal. The last thing I remember is Mark's hand flying out to shield me, and his voice shouting my name. Elena. When I woke up, I didn't know I was awake. It was just darkness, then a slow, creeping awareness. The beep, the whoosh, the terrifying inability to move a single muscle, not a finger, not a toe. I couldn't even blink on command. Panic, pure and primal, flooded my mind. It was a silent internal tsunami, and I was drowning in it. Then I heard him, Mark. His voice cut through the fog. Elena, baby, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me. I tried. God, how I tried. I marshaled every neuron, every last shred of will I possessed, and tried to make my index finger twitch. Nothing. I could feel the warmth of his hand around mine, a phantom sensation, but my own body was a stranger, a cold, unresponsive statue. He started crying then, a choked, broken sound that shattered what was left of my heart. In that moment, all I wanted was to comfort him, to tell him I was still here, that we'd get through this. The first few weeks, he was my rock. He was there from sunup until the night nurses gently shooed him out. He read to me from my favorite novels, his voice a soothing balm on the raw edges of my fear. He'd tell me about his day at the architecture firm, about the funny thing our golden retriever Buster did that morning. He'd hold my limp hand and whisper promises. We're going to beat this, Elena. I'm not going anywhere. You and me, remember? Always. His words were a lifeline in the silent abyss of my consciousness. They were the only thing that kept me from letting go, from allowing my mind to just drift away into the endless gray. He was my Mark, my loving, devoted husband, the man I had built a life with, the man who was waiting for me to come back. Then there was Sarah. She was one of the younger nurses, with kind eyes and gentle hands. Unlike some of the others who treated me like a chore, a collection of tubes and readings, Sarah spoke to me. Not at me or about me, to me. Good morning, Elena, she'd say while changing my IV. It's a beautiful day out. The sun is shining. She'd brush my hair, telling me about a funny movie she watched or her plans for the weekend. I couldn't respond, of course, but her voice was a small island of normalcy in my chaotic sea of silence. She saw a person, not a prognosis. I came to cherish her shifts, the quiet competence and the simple dignity she afforded me. She was a friend in the only way I could have one. The change in Mark was subtle at first. His visits got a little shorter. The chapters he read became fewer. The stories about his day grew more vague. I told myself it was the strain, the stress of it all. He was working, taking care of the house, dealing with insurance companies, and spending hours at a hospital, talking to a wife who couldn't talk back. Of course he was exhausted. Of course he was fraying at the edges. I loved him, and my heart ached for the burden he was carrying. I just had to get better. I had to find a way to move, to blink, to show him I was still fighting, that his vigil wasn't in vain. But my body remained a stubborn, silent prison. Today felt different. A heavy gray rain was lashing against the window, and the room felt darker than usual. Mark came in late, well after his usual time. He didn't greet me with his normal, "Hey, baby." He just pulled the chair up to my bedside and sat down, his shoulders slumped. He didn't take my hand. He just stared at my face, but his eyes looked right through me. The silence stretched on, broken only by the beep and the whoosh. I screamed at him in my head. "Mark, what is it? Talk to me, please." Finally, he spoke. His voice was a low, tired whisper, not meant for me, but for himself. "I can't do this anymore, Elena," he murmured, his gaze fixed on the ventilator. "I just can't." My non-existent heart plummeted. He was giving up. The thought was a physical blow. The bills, my God, the bills are piling up. The firm is talking about downsizing, and you're just lying here. His voice took on a sharper edge, an ugly, unfamiliar edge. "They said you'd never wake up. No quality of life. Just this, a machine breathing for you." He stood up and began to pace, a caged animal. "I met someone, Elena." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. My mind reeled. No, not my Mark. He wouldn't. "Her name is Jessica. She understands what I'm going through. She makes me feel alive again, not like this." He gestured vaguely at me, at the bed, at the machines that were my whole world. He was talking about me like I was the obstacle, the burden, the problem he needed to solve. He stopped pacing and stood over me. The smell of his cologne, the one I'd bought him for our anniversary, filled my senses. It smelled like betrayal. "That life insurance policy we took out," he said, his voice dropping even lower, becoming conspiratorial. "The one for the cottage. It's a lot of money, enough to start over, enough for a new life." A cold, terrifying dread, colder than anything I had ever felt, seeped into my consciousness. I finally understood. This wasn't about him being tired. This wasn't about him giving up hope. This was a calculation. He walked over to the life support machine, the steady whoosh of the ventilator filling the quiet room. "The doctors said it would be a kindness," he whispered, his hand hovering over the control panel, "to let you go, to end your suffering." But I wasn't suffering. Not until this moment. In this moment, I was in hell. My internal screaming reached a fever pitch, a silent shriek of pure terror. "No, Mark, please, I'm here. I love you." He was going to kill me. My husband was going to murder me. Just then, the door swung open silently. It was Sarah, the nurse. My heart, the real one, leaped with a desperate, impossible hope. "Help me! Sarah, help me!" But she didn't rush in. She stood just inside the doorway, partially hidden. Mark didn't see her. His back was to the door, his entire focus on the machine keeping me alive. I saw Sarah's eyes widen as she took in the scene. My husband, his hand poised over the power switch, his face a mask of grim determination. I saw her hand slip into her pocket and pull out her phone. She was so quick, so quiet. With a deft movement of her thumb, her screen came to life. Through the reflection in the polished floor, I saw it. A tiny blinking red dot appeared in the corner of her phone's screen. She was recording. Mark took a deep, shuddering breath, his fingers wrapping around the main power button. "I'm so sorry, Elena," he lied, his voice thick with fake emotion. "I love you." And then he pushed the button. The life-giving whoosh of my lungs cut out. The rhythmic beep of my heart monitor fell silent. The room was plunged into an absolute deafening quiet. The silence was a physical thing. It pressed in on me, a heavy blanket smothering my senses. For months, the beep and the whoosh had been the soundtrack to my existence, the proof that I was still here. Without them, there was nothing, a void. My thoughts, which had been a frantic scream, suddenly became sluggish, thick with a syrupy dread. The first wave of panic was purely physiological. My lungs, now inert sacks of flesh, began to burn. My brain screamed for oxygen it could no longer receive. The edges of my limited vision started to fray, replaced by sparkling black pinpricks. This is it. This is how I die. Murdered in a hospital bed by the man who promised to love me in sickness and in health. His last words to me were a lie. His face, the last thing I would ever see, was twisted with a grotesque piety that made me want to vomit. Then the void was shattered. A piercing, high-pitched alarm began to shriek from the central monitor. Red lights flashed across my ceiling, painting the water stains in blood. "What did you do?" Sarah's voice was a thunderclap. She burst into the room, her phone still clutched in one hand, her face a mask of fury. She didn't hesitate. She slammed a big red button on the wall code blue and then shoved Mark, a man twice her size, away from the machine. "Get away from her!" He stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock at being discovered. The act was over. The grieving husband evaporated, replaced by a cornered rat. "It malfunctioned," he sputtered, his voice cracking. "The machine, it just turned off. Help her, for God's sake. Somebody help my wife." The door flew open and the room was suddenly full. A torrent of blue and white scrubs flooded my vision. Voices overlapped, sharp and clinical. "No pulse! Starting compressions! Get the bag valve mask now!" A heavy weight descended on my chest, a brutal rhythmic pressure that felt like it would shatter my ribs. Someone forced a mask over my face and I felt a puff of air, cold and artificial, forced into my starving lungs. It was agonizing, but it was life. Through the chaos, I could still see Mark. He was backed against the far wall, performing the role of his life. He ran his hands through his hair, his face a perfect picture of horrified panic. He was watching the doctors work on me, shouting encouragement. "Come on, Elena! Fight, baby! Don't leave me!" The hypocrisy was so profound it made my mind ache. Sarah wasn't buying it for a second. While the crash team worked on me, she stood near the door, her stance rigid, her eyes locked on Mark. She never took her eyes off him. I saw her speak to another nurse who had arrived, pointing first at Mark and then at the power button on the ventilator. She held up her phone, her expression grim and unwavering. Mark saw it too. His feigned panic flickered, and for a split second I saw a flash of pure, murderous rage in his eyes directed at Sarah. He knew what she had. He knew what she had seen. The room fell into a focused rhythm. The compression on my chest, the bagging of my lungs, the shouted orders. My consciousness was a flickering candle in a hurricane. I was drifting, the blackness pulling at me. And then I heard it. A click, a whir, and then the blessed, beautiful whoosh of the ventilator restarting. The steady, reassuring beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor followed a moment later. Air, sweet and full, filled my lungs. The team visibly relaxed. One of the doctors shone a light into my unresponsive eyes. "We have her back. Vitals are stabilizing." A collective sigh of relief filled the room, except it didn't come from my husband. He was still staring at Sarah, his mask of grief now curdling into something else, something ugly and threatening. The doctor in charge turned to him. "Mr. Davies, what happened? The machine appears to have been manually powered down." Before Mark could spin another lie, Sarah stepped forward. Her voice was clear and steady, cutting through the post-crisis adrenaline. "He turned it off," she said. "I saw him. He walked over, said, 'I'm sorry,' and he pushed the button. The doctor looked from Sarah to Mark, his expression confused. Mark scoffed, a bitter, incredulous sound. "What? That's insane. She's hysterical. I was sitting right here and it just stopped. This nurse is clearly incompetent and trying to cover for faulty equipment." "I have it on video," Sarah said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The 4 words landed in the room with the force of a detonation. Every head turned towards her. She held up her phone. I saw him approach the machine. I knew something was wrong. I recorded the whole thing. Mark's face went white. All the color drained from him, leaving a pasty, gray mask. That's an invasion of privacy. You can't just record people. That's illegal," he stammered, pointing a trembling finger at her. "I'm calling security. I'm calling a lawyer." The head doctor held up a hand. "Okay, everyone calm down. Nurse, give me the phone. Someone call security up here now, and the police." The room began to clear out, leaving me, Mark, Sarah, and a single burly security guard who had arrived with startling speed. The guard stood by the door, his arms crossed, his presence a silent declaration that no one was leaving. Mark was breathing heavily, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape that wasn't there. His gaze fell on Sarah, filled with a venom that chilled me to the bone. Then his eyes moved. They moved to me, lying helpless in the bed. He walked slowly back to my bedside, the security guard tensing but not intervening. He looked down at my face. The terror must have been visible in my eyes, the only part of me that could still express anything. He knew I had heard it all. He knew I was a witness. He leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper meant only for me, so low that no one else could hear. "You think she can save you?" he breathed, his expression no longer one of fear, but of chilling, absolute certainty. "You can't move. You can't speak. You can't tell anyone what you saw. You're my word against a crazy nurse's illegal video. And when this is all over—" He leaned closer still, his lips almost brushing my ear. "I will be back to finish this. I promise." His whisper hung in the air, a poisonous vapor only I could feel. My mind, my only sanctuary, was now violated, tainted by his promise. The promise wasn't just to kill me. It was to get away with it, to erase me and step into a new life built on my ashes and our shared dreams. The security guard shifted his weight by the door, oblivious. Sarah stood frozen, her face pale but resolute. They had heard the shouting, but they hadn't heard the truth, whispered like a serpent's hiss into my ear. They didn't know the monster had just taken off his mask for me alone. The arrival of the police was a blur of officialdom. 2 detectives, a man and a woman, entered the room with an aura of grim competence. The man, Detective Miller, was older, with a tired face that looked like it had seen every flavor of human ugliness and was no longer surprised by any of it. The woman, Detective Hayes, was younger, with sharp, observant eyes that seemed to miss nothing. They took in the scene, the crash team's discarded wrappers, the readouts on my monitors, Sarah clutching her phone like a holy relic, the burly security guard, and my husband, who had already begun his next performance. He sank into the visitor's chair, burying his face in his hands. It was a perfect gesture of a man utterly broken by grief and shock. When he looked up at Detective Miller, his eyes were glistening. "I don't understand what happened," he began, a tremor in his voice that was pure performance art. "One minute, we were sitting here, and the next, all the alarms went off. The machine just died." My silent scream was a physical thing, a pressure building behind my eyes. Liar, liar, liar. I wanted to set him on fire with my thoughts. "My nurse," he continued, gesturing vaguely toward Sarah. She became hysterical, started screaming at me, accusing me of hurting Elena. He choked on my name as if it were a shard of glass in his throat. "We've had issues with her before. She's intense, overly emotional. I think the stress of this place is getting to her." He was painting Sarah as an unhinged, incompetent caregiver, and me as the tragic object of his undying love. It was brilliant. It was diabolical. And from the outside, it was utterly believable. Detective Miller's gaze shifted to Sarah. "Ma'am, what's your version of events?" Sarah stood tall. She did not look hysterical. Her voice was ice. "I entered the room to do my hourly checks. I saw Mr. Davies standing over the life support machine. His back was to me. I heard him say, 'I'm so sorry, Elena, I love you.' And then I saw him deliberately press the main power button. The ventilator shut down immediately." She held up her phone. "I recorded it." This was the moment, the silver bullet. But Mark was ready. "She recorded me?" he asked, his voice rising with theatrical incredulity. "Without my consent? In a private hospital room during the worst moment of my life? What kind of person does that? That's not just unethical, it's illegal. How can you possibly trust anything from a woman who would do something like that?" Detective Miller's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Doubt. Mark had planted a seed of doubt, not about what was on the video, but about the person who took it. Detective Hayes stepped forward. "May I see the video, please?" she asked Sarah, her voice calm and neutral. Sarah unlocked her phone and handed it over. The two detectives huddled together, watching the small screen. I could see the reflection in Detective Miller's glasses. I saw my own still face, the side of Mark's body, his hand reaching out. I saw the machine go dark. The alarms in the video started to blare, mirroring the chaos that had just unfolded. When it was over, Hayes looked up. "The video shows you pressing the button, Mr. Davies." "I was trying to fix it," Mark insisted, jumping to his feet. "I saw a red light blinking on and off, and I thought something was wrong. I panicked. I thought maybe resetting it would help. I don't know anything about these machines. I was just trying to save my wife." He pointed at me, his eyes pleading with the detectives. "I love her more than life itself. Why would I ever hurt her?" His words were a masterclass in manipulation. The video showed an action, but he was rewriting the intent. He said, "I'm sorry," because he was sorry he couldn't fix it. He pushed the button because he was in a panic. Each lie was a perfect interlocking piece, building a wall around the truth. And what could I do? I was the only other witness. I saw the cold calculation in his eyes before he pushed that button. I heard the chilling finality in his voice. I was lying right here, a living, breathing testament to his crime, and I was utterly useless. I focused all my energy, every ounce of my being, every spark of consciousness into my right index finger, the one he used to hold, move, just twitch, show them something. I strained, my mind screaming with the effort. Nothing. My body was a stone, deaf to my commands. "We'll need to take this phone as evidence," Detective Miller said, placing Sarah's phone into a clear plastic bag, "and we'll get statements from the hospital staff and the technicians who maintain this equipment. For now, neither of you are to leave the hospital." He turned to Mark. "We understand this is a difficult time, sir. We just need to get to the bottom of what appears to be a serious equipment malfunction or a case of user error." User error. They were considering it. Mark's story was working. My blood ran cold. The detectives left, leaving the room in a state of suspended animation. Mark sat back down, the mask of the grieving husband slipping back into place. Sarah stood by the opposite wall, refusing to leave my side, her arms crossed, her eyes burning holes into him. The security guard remained posted by the door. Hours crawled by. A hospital administrator came in and spoke to Mark in hushed tones, then to Sarah. More waiting. The silence in the room was a war, a battle of wills between my husband's patient deception and my nurse's furious vigilance. Finally, late in the evening, the detectives returned. My heart, the real one, hammered against my ribs. This was it. They would have checked the machine's logs. They would have seen it wasn't a malfunction. They would arrest him. Detective Miller cleared his throat. "Mr. Davies," he began, his voice flat, "the hospital's technician confirms there was no equipment malfunction. The machine was powered down manually. However, your claim that you were acting in a panic is plausible, and the legality of the video evidence is questionable." My world tilted. Plausible? Questionable? It was a flimsy, pathetic lie. "For now," Detective Miller continued, "we don't have enough to press charges." The words sucked the air from my phantom lungs. Mark visibly sagged with relief, a genuine emotion for the first time all day. "You're free to go, but don't leave town. The investigation is ongoing." Free to go. The two most terrifying words I had ever heard. Mark stood up, smoothing down his shirt. He shook Detective Miller's hand, thanking him for his professionalism. He nodded curtly at Sarah, a flicker of triumphant hatred in his eyes. Then he turned to me. He walked over to the bed, and in front of everyone, he leaned down and kissed my forehead. "I'll be back tomorrow, my love," he whispered, his lips cold against my skin. "Get some rest." It wasn't a comfort. It was a threat. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone in the dark with his promise hanging over me, more real and more terrifying than any monster under the bed. He was out there, and he was coming back. The sound of the door closing behind him was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of a cage door locking, but he was the one walking free. I was left inside, bait in a trap. The detectives left. The security guard, having no one left to guard, disappeared. The only one remaining was Sarah. She stood in the dim light of the monitors, her face etched with a mixture of disbelief and fury. The system I had been raised to trust, the police, the evidence, the truth, had failed spectacularly. It had looked a monster in the face and let him walk away with a pat on the arm and a gentle warning not to leave town. Sarah pulled the visitor's chair close to my bed, scraping it against the linoleum. The sound was harsh, abrasive, a perfect match for the state of my nerves. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just sat there, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of my chest, a movement now powered by the machine Mark had tried to silence. Her presence was a small comfort, a single flickering candle in the encroaching darkness of my terror. He was coming back. That promise echoed in the silent chambers of my mind, drowning out everything else. "I'm not leaving you," she finally whispered, her voice fierce. "Not tonight. I'll tell them I'm staying to monitor you. They can't stop me." She reached out, and with a surprising gentleness, took my limp hand in hers. Her hand was warm, strong. "Elena," she said, her eyes boring into mine, as if she could see the trapped person screaming inside. "I know you're in there. I know you heard everything. I am so sorry. I thought the video would be enough." A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "He's a liar, a good one. But he won't get away with this. I swear to you, he won't." Her words were a balm, but the fear remained, a cold, hard knot in my gut. What could she do? She was a nurse. Mark was a wealthy, respected architect. He had already twisted the narrative, painting her as unstable and himself as the devoted, panicked husband. Her video was their only real leverage, and the detective himself had called its legality into question. It was his word against hers, and his word was wrapped in a cloak of privilege and charm that the world found so easy to believe. The night was endless. Every creak of the hospital building, every distant cough, every footstep in the hallway made my non-existent muscles clench. I imagined Mark's face in the shadows, his cold smile, his hand reaching for the switch again. Sleep was impossible. My mind was a racetrack, replaying his whispered threat, the detective's dismissive words, the triumphant look in his eyes as he walked away. Sarah dozed in the chair, her head lolling to one side, but her hand never left mine. Even in sleep, she was my guardian, my only line of defense. The next morning, the world tried to pretend everything was normal. A different nurse came in to do my morning care. She was brisk and efficient, chattering about the weather while she worked. She clearly knew nothing of the drama from the night before, and I was once again just a body, a set of vitals on a chart. Sarah had been forced to go home at the end of her double shift, but not before she cornered my doctor and the charge nurse, her voice a low, urgent murmur in the hallway. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel the intensity. She was fighting for me. Mark arrived just before noon. He came in carrying a bouquet of my favorite flowers, stargazer lilies, their cloying funeral parlor scent filling the room. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his hair immaculate. He looked like he had just come from a successful business meeting, not from a police interrogation for the attempted murder of his wife. He smiled at the nurse, a dazzling, charming smile. "Thank you so much for taking such good care of her," he said, his voice dripping with sincerity. The nurse practically melted. "Of course, Mr. Davies. You have a lovely day." She bustled out, leaving me alone with him. He pulled the chair up to my bed, placing the lilies on the bedside table where I would be forced to smell them. "Well," he said, his voice dropping to a conversational tone, all pretense of grief gone. "That was a bit of a mess, wasn't it?" He picked up my hand, his touch now feeling like a spider crawling on my skin. He examined my fingers, my wedding ring. "That little nurse of yours has quite the imagination. A video, really, so dramatic." He chuckled, a low, ugly sound. "But you see, Elena, it doesn't matter. People see what they want to see, and they see a heartbroken husband and a hysterical, over-involved nurse. Who are they gonna believe?" He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, just like the night before. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. We're going to sue the hospital for faulty equipment and emotional distress. We're going to sue that little bitch, Sarah, for defamation and illegal recording. By the time I'm done, she'll be lucky to get a job cleaning bedpans, and my story will be the only one anyone remembers." My mind reeled. He wasn't just going to get away with it. He was going to profit from it. He was going to destroy the one person who tried to save me. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated evil of it was breathtaking. "But we still have our little problem, don't we?" he murmured, stroking my thumb. "You, lying here, costing a fortune, keeping me from my new life." His eyes scanned the room, lingering on the life support machine. "I can't try that again, obviously. They'll be watching for that. No, I have to be more creative." He smiled, a tight, thin-lipped expression devoid of any warmth. "The doctors have been talking about your prognosis. Grim, they say. No meaningful recovery. They've mentioned palliative care, making you comfortable. They've even used the words compassionate withdrawal of care. All it takes is my signature. As your loving husband and next of kin, I get to decide when it's time to let you go." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't going to pull a plug. He was going to use the system against me. He was going to sign a piece of paper, and the doctors, with sad, sympathetic smiles, would kill me for him. They would call it mercy. He would weep by my bedside, and no one would ever know. It was the perfect crime. He stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from his suit pants. "Jessica is so excited to see the lake house," he said conversationally. "I think we'll put in a big garden. You always wanted a garden." He was taunting me with our shared dreams, twisting them into weapons. He walked to the door, then paused, turning back to look at me one last time. "Don't worry," he said, his smile widening. "It will be peaceful, and this time no one will be there to interrupt." The door clicked shut, leaving me drowning in the scent of lilies and the chilling certainty of his plan. He had found a way to finish the job, and this time it would be perfectly legal. His words settled over me like a shroud. The scent of the stargazer lilies was suffocating, each breath a reminder of his visit, of his perfectly legal, medically sanctioned murder plot. The genius of it was its simplicity. He wouldn't need to sneak in at night or tamper with machines. He would do it in broad daylight, armed with a pen and the world's sympathy. He would be the grieving widower, finally making the unimaginably difficult decision to let his beloved wife go. He would be praised for his strength, for his compassion, and I would be a silent, unwilling participant in my own execution. Panic was a useless emotion, but it was all I had. It clawed at the inside of my skull, a frantic, caged animal. I had to do something. I had to fight back. But how? My body was a useless lump of flesh, my voice a phantom. Sarah was my only ally, but Mark was already moving to discredit her, to bury her in lawsuits and accusations. She was one nurse against a respected architect and his high-priced legal team. The odds were impossibly grim. For the rest of the day, I focused on a single point, my right index finger. I remembered the phantom limb exercises they talked about for amputees, how they could train their brains to feel and even move limbs that weren't there. My limb was there. It was just disconnected. I poured every ounce of my will, every memory of movement, every shred of synaptic energy into that one digit. I pictured the nerve pathways, glowing lines of light connecting my brain to my hand. I imagined the tiny muscles contracting. Move, twitch, just once. Move. I strained until my silent mind ached with the effort, until the black pinpricks threatened the edges of my vision. Nothing. It remained as still and lifeless as a marble finger on a statue. When Sarah came in for her shift that evening, the relief that washed over me was so profound it was almost painful. She took one look at the lilies and her face hardened. Without a word, she picked up the vase, walked it into the small bathroom, and I heard her dump them, water and all, into the toilet. The finality of the flush was the most satisfying sound I'd heard all day. "Sorry," she said. Wiping her hands on a paper towel, she came back into the room. "I'm allergic to bullshit." She sat down, her expression serious. "Okay, Elena, I've been doing some thinking and some research." She pulled her phone out, but this time she wasn't recording. She was scrolling through web pages. "Mark's right about one thing. As your next of kin, he has the medical power of attorney. He can make these decisions, but—" She looked up at me, her eyes intense. "That power isn't absolute. It can be challenged. If it can be proven that he's not acting in your best interests, a court can appoint a new guardian, a legal advocate." Hope, a fragile, terrifying thing, flickered in my chest. "The problem," she continued, her brow furrowed, "is proof. The video is a start, but his lawyers will argue it was taken illegally, that it's inadmissible. We need more. We need something undeniable. Something that proves he doesn't have your best interests at heart. Something that proves you are aware." Her eyes locked on mine. "Elena, you are the only one who can provide that proof. We need a signal. Any signal. A twitch. An eye movement. Anything that you can control. Anything to show a doctor, a judge, someone, that there is a thinking, feeling person inside this body." Her words echoed the desperate, fruitless effort I had been making all day. I wanted to scream at her, "I'm trying. God, I'm trying so hard." The frustration was a physical pressure, building until I felt like my head would explode. She saw the anguish in my eyes. Hey, easy," she said softly, placing her hand on my arm. "No pressure. I know you're trying. We just need to find a way. We need to find the right key to unlock the door." We spent the next few hours trying everything. She'd ask me to blink once for yes, twice for no. My eyelids remained stubbornly still. She held my hand, asking me to squeeze, to move a single finger. Nothing. She went through the alphabet, asking me to twitch my lip when she got to the first letter of my mother's name. I tried so hard my jaw ached, but my face was a mask. With each failure, the knot of despair in my chest tightened. Mark's plan was a ticking clock, and we were losing time. He could walk in tomorrow with the papers. He could do it next week. We didn't know. All we knew was that it was coming. Late that night, as Sarah was checking my chart, a new doctor came in. He was young, with a kind face and a nervous energy. Dr. Evans, he introduced himself, nodding at Sarah. I'm the new neurology fellow on rotation. He came over to my bed and began his examination, the familiar routine of checking my pupils with a penlight, testing my reflexes with a little rubber hammer. Any change in status? He asked Sarah. No change, she said, her voice carefully neutral. But I could see her watching him, a spark of an idea in her eyes. This doctor was new. He wasn't jaded. He didn't have months of preconceived notions about my grim prognosis. He was a fresh set of eyes. Dr. Evans was meticulous. He checked everything. As he was finishing, he leaned over me, speaking in a clear, professional voice. Elena, I know the data says you're unresponsive, but I always believe in talking to my patients. We're going to take good care of you, okay? At that moment, Sarah stepped forward. Doctor, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I know this sounds crazy, and I know what the charts say, but I think she's in there. I think she can hear us. Dr. Evans looked at her, his expression a mixture of sympathy and skepticism. Nurse, I appreciate your dedication, but all our tests, the EEGs, the MRIs, they show only minimal brainstem function. Just try one more thing, Sarah pleaded. Please, it's not a standard test. She looked from the doctor back to me. Elena, listen to me. Forget your fingers. Forget your eyes. Focus on one thing, the monitor, the heart rate monitor. I stared past her at the glowing green numbers on the screen. 82, steady, rhythmic. Beep, beep, beep. Your autonomic nervous system is still working, Sarah said, her voice a lifeline. Your heart rate, your breathing, it reacts to things. Fear, pain, surprise. Let's try to control it with emotion. Think of something terrifying, Elena. Think about what Mark tried to do. Think about his promise to come back. I didn't have to try. The memory was always there, lurking just below the surface. I let it wash over me. The silence, the cold dread, his whisper in my ear. I pictured his face, his triumphant smile. My heart, the real one, began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. I watched the number on the screen. 85, 90, 98, 105, 112. The beeping grew faster, more urgent. Beep, 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 beep. Look, Sarah cried, pointing at the monitor. Dr. Evans' eyes widened. He stared at the screen, then back at my placid, unmoving face. It could be a random fluctuation, he said, but his voice was uncertain. Now, Elena, Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through my fear. Calm down. Think of something happy. Think of the cottage by the lake. Think of Buster, your dog. Think of you and Mark before all this. I forced the ugly images of Mark away, replacing them with a memory from last summer. The two of us on a blanket by the lake, Buster chasing a frisbee, the sun warm on my skin. I remembered Mark's laugh, that big booming sound. The memory was painful now, tainted, but I held on to the feeling, the warmth, the peace. I focused on my breathing, matching the slow, steady whoosh of the ventilator. I watched the numbers, 110, 104, 95, 90, 84, 82. The beeping slowed, returning to its steady, placid rhythm. The room was silent save for the hum of the machines. Dr. Evans was speechless. He stared at the monitor, then at me, then back at the monitor. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. Do that again, he whispered, his voice filled with awe. My heart. He wanted me to do it again. The request was a jolt of pure adrenaline, a spark on a dry field. For the first time in months, I wasn't just a passive observer of my own bodily functions. I was a conductor, and my heart was the orchestra. Sarah, sensing the crucial nature of the moment, jumped in. Think about the day you got married, Elena, she prompted, her voice steady and clear. Remember walking down the aisle. Remember the flowers. I closed my inner eyes, and I was there. The scent of freesia and gardenias, the nervous energy humming in the air, the sight of Mark at the altar, his face lit up with a smile so radiant it had seemed to steal the sun. The memory was a double-edged sword. The joy of that moment was now inextricably linked to the profound betrayal that followed. The conflict, the pure, raw emotion of it, love and hate, joy and agony, sent my heart into a frenzy. I didn't even have to try. The numbers on the monitor shot up like a rocket. 90, 110, 125, 130. The beeping was a frantic staccato rhythm, an alarm signaling the war raging inside me. Okay, bring it back down, Dr. Evans said, his voice hushed, almost reverent. He wasn't talking to Sarah anymore. He was talking directly to me. He believed. I could feel it. The validation was a powerful balm. I forced the wedding memories away, pushing them into a locked box in the back of my mind. I sought stillness. I pictured a calm, glassy lake at dawn, the surface unbroken, the air silent and cool. I visualized the green line on the monitor flattening out, the peaks and valleys of my heart rate becoming gentle hills. Slowly, painstakingly, the numbers began to descend. 20, 110, 98, 85, 82, back to baseline, steady as a rock. Dr. Evans let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a full minute. He ran a hand through his already messy hair, his eyes wide with a combination of scientific excitement and sheer disbelief. I've never seen anything like this, he stammered. Conscious, deliberate autonomic modulation in a patient with this level of brain trauma? It's supposed to be impossible. He looked at me, truly at me, for the first time. Not as a collection of symptoms or a grim prognosis, but as a person trapped, but a person nonetheless. "Hello, Elena," he said, and for the first time it felt like someone was actually talking to me. "We have it," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Doctor, you saw it. You're a witness." "Yes," Dr. Evans said, his mind clearly racing. "Yes. This changes everything. The diagnosis, the prognosis, the entire plan of care." He turned to Sarah. "We need to document this, meticulously. Film it. Get another neurologist in here to confirm. This can't just be my word or yours. We need irrefutable proof." He paused, his expression turning serious. "And we need to protect her, if what you told me about her husband is true." He didn't need to finish the sentence. We all knew what it meant. Mark's compassionate withdrawal of care would now be seen for what it was: murder. The next hour was a whirlwind. Dr. Evans brought in the on-call chief of neurology, a stern, older woman named Dr. Allister, who walked in with an air of profound skepticism. She watched, her arms crossed, as Dr. Evans and Sarah guided me through the process again. "Elena, spike your heart rate." I thought of Mark's hands on the power switch. The numbers climbed. 128. "Elena, bring it down." I thought of floating in a cool, quiet pool. 83. Dr. Allister's professional mask cracked. She leaned forward, staring at the monitor, then at my face, her jaw slightly agape. "My God," she breathed. "They documented everything. They brought in a hospital camera on a rolling stand and recorded me responding to their commands over and over until I was mentally and emotionally exhausted. Each spike was a sprint, each calming a marathon of control. But I did it. I performed like my life depended on it because it did." Dr. Allister made a call. "Get me hospital legal now," she commanded into the phone. "And security. I want a 24/7 guard on this room, and I want a temporary restraining order put in place against the patient's husband, Mark Davies, effective immediately." Sarah gripped my hand, squeezing it tight. We had done it. We had built a fortress around me. Mark couldn't touch me now. He couldn't sign a piece of paper and have me quietly euthanized. The system, the one that had failed me so spectacularly just 24 hours earlier, was now roaring to life to protect me. The relief was so immense it left me feeling weak, a hollowed-out shell. The rest of the night was quiet. A new, much more alert security guard was posted outside my door. Sarah stayed with me, updating my chart with an almost manic glee, documenting every fluctuation, every response. "They believe us, Elena," she kept saying, as if trying to convince herself it was real. "They finally believe us." The next morning, I was no longer just another patient. I was a medical phenomenon. A parade of neurologists, medical students, and administrators filed in and out of my room, speaking in hushed, excited tones. I was a miracle, a puzzle, a case study that would be written up in medical journals. But amidst all the clinical excitement, a cold dread began to creep back in. They had stopped Mark from killing me here in the hospital. But what happened next? What was the end game? I was still trapped. I had a voice of a sort, but it was a clumsy, blunt instrument. I could say yes or no with my heart rate, but I couldn't tell them the details. I couldn't tell them about Jessica. I couldn't describe the look in his eyes, the whisper in my ear. And then Mark arrived. He was stopped at the door by the security guard. I could hear his voice, calm and reasonable at first. "I'm sorry. There must be some mistake. I'm her husband." The guard's voice was a low, firm rumble. "Sir, no one is allowed in this room without clearance from Dr. Allister." Mark's tone shifted. The charming husband evaporated. "What the hell are you talking about? I am her legal next of kin. You can't keep me from my wife." The commotion brought Dr. Allister out of a nearby office. "Mr. Davies," her voice was pure ice, "your visiting privileges have been revoked. There is a restraining order against you. If you don't leave hospital premises immediately, I will have you arrested for trespassing." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then I heard Mark laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was cold, sharp, and utterly devoid of humor. "A restraining order? On what grounds? This is absurd. It's that nurse, isn't it? She has poisoned you all with her lies. You have no idea what you're dealing with. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." His footsteps receded down the hall, sharp and angry. The threat was clear. This wasn't over. He had been thwarted but not defeated. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals are the most dangerous. Later that afternoon, Detective Miller returned. He looked different this time, humbled. He came in with Dr. Allister and stood by my bed. "Mrs. Davies, Elena," he began, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Dr. Allister has shown me the video evidence from this morning. I want to apologize. We were wrong to doubt the initial report." He cleared his throat. "With this new evidence of your cognitive awareness, we now have a credible witness to the events of that night. We have enough to bring your husband in for questioning on suspicion of attempted murder." A wave of triumph, fierce and hot, washed through me. He was going to be arrested. It was finally happening. "But we need your testimony," Detective Miller continued, "and as you can't speak, we'll have to do this carefully. We have a forensic psychiatrist coming in. We'll work out a system, yes and no. We'll ask you questions and you'll answer with your heart rate. It will be slow, but it's the best we can do." It was more than I could have dreamed of. A chance to tell my story. A chance for justice. That evening, as Sarah was getting ready to leave, she turned on the small television mounted on the wall. The local news was on, and then I saw his face. It was a press conference, held on the steps of his lawyer's downtown office. Mark stood at a podium, his face a mask of dignified sorrow. Jessica, a pretty blonde I'd never seen before, stood beside him, her hand on his arm, looking up at him with adoration. "My client, Mark Davies, is the victim of a vindictive and unstable hospital staff," his lawyer said, his voice smooth and confident. "They are holding his beloved wife, Elena, hostage and have concocted these monstrous lies to cover up their own medical negligence." Then Mark stepped to the microphone. "All I want is to be with my wife," he said, his voice breaking perfectly. She is my world, and I will fight with everything I have to get her back from these people who are keeping us apart." He looked directly into the camera, and I felt as if he was looking right at me. A slow, chilling smile played on his lips, a smile only I would understand. "And I know," he said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper, "that my Elena is fighting to get back to me, too." The television screen flickered with his handsome, lying face. He had turned my prison into his stage, casting himself as the romantic hero fighting a corrupt institution to rescue his damsel in distress. And I was the damsel, the silent, beautiful prop in his twisted narrative. The world wouldn't see a murderer attempting to silence his only witness. They would see a devoted husband battling a heartless hospital. He wasn't just trying to get away with murder, he was trying to win an Emmy for it. "Turn it off!" Sarah's voice was a tight coil of fury. She snatched the remote and the screen went black, but the image of his smug smile was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. He had a girlfriend, Jessica, standing right there beside him, playing the part of the supportive friend. The audacity was dizzying. He was building a new life right on top of the rubble of our old one, and he was using my tragedy as the foundation. "Don't let him get to you," Sarah said, though her own hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists. "It's a performance. He's trying to control the narrative before the police can. It's what guilty people do." I knew she was right, but the sight of him, so confident and so beloved by the cameras, sent a wave of icy dread through me. He was good at this. He had been playing the part of the perfect husband for years. This was just a bigger stage. The next day, the testimony began. Detective Miller, Detective Hayes, and a gentle-faced woman named Dr. Reed, the forensic psychiatrist, gathered in my room. The process was agonizingly slow, a marathon of concentration. They started with baseline questions to establish a clear yes-no response with my heart rate. "Is your name Elena Davies?" Spike. 125. "Are you in a hospital in Chicago?" Spike. 1 in 22. "Is the current president of the United States named George Washington?" My heart remained steady. 82. Calm. It was working. Then Detective Miller began the real questioning. "Elena, on the night of the incident, did your husband, Mark Davies, approach your life support machine?" I let the memory of that night flood me. The fear, the shock. Spike. 135. The monitor beeped frantically. "Did the machine malfunction on its own?" Calm. 84. "Did he press the power button deliberately?" My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of truth. Spike. 140. I pushed it as high as I could, pouring all my rage and terror into that single biological signal. Dr. Reed documented every response, the detectives taking furious notes. They asked about his words. Did he say, "I'm sorry," before he pressed the button? Spike. 132. Did he say he was doing it to end your suffering? Spike. 138. Did he mention a woman named Jessica? The question hung in the air. Spike, Spike, Spike. 145. Did he mention a life insurance policy? 150. I felt my consciousness start to fray at the edges from the sheer strain. The numbers on the monitor were a testament to my silent screams. With every yes, I was tearing down the facade he had so carefully constructed. I was taking his story and setting it on fire. The process took 2 full days. They had to take long breaks to allow my heart rate to recover. It was the most exhausting thing I had ever done. By the end, I felt like a hollowed-out husk, but a triumphant one. I had told them everything. I had given them the truth. Detective Miller's face was grim. "Thank you, Elena," he said, his voice heavy. "This is a very strong, very clear statement. This gives us what we need." They were going to arrest him, this time for real. The legal maneuvering, the press conferences, it would all come crashing down. But Mark was always one step ahead. The following morning, his lawyer filed an emergency motion with the court. He wasn't just suing the hospital for negligence anymore. He was petitioning the court for an independent medical evaluation and to have me transferred to a private care facility of his choosing. He was claiming the hospital staff, led by a disgruntled and unstable nurse, had brainwashed me and were coercing my involuntary biological responses to frame him. He argued my heart rate fluctuations were not a form of communication, but a symptom of my severe brain injury, manipulated by the stress they were putting me under. He was trying to invalidate my voice. He was trying to take me away from Sarah, from Dr. Evans, from everyone who could protect me. He was trying to get me alone. The hospital's lawyers fought back, but the judge, wary of the media storm Mark had created, granted the first part of the motion, the independent medical evaluation. A doctor chosen by the court would come in and assess my condition and my ability to communicate. My fate, my credibility, my very life now rested on the opinion of one single person I had never met. The day of the evaluation, the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Dr. Eris Thorne arrived like a storm front. He was a tall, imposing man in a severe suit with a reputation for being a brilliant but deeply cynical neurologist. He had a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and a demeanor to match. He dismissed Sarah, Dr. Evans, and the detectives from the room, insisting on conducting his evaluation alone with only a court-appointed nurse present. My heart sank. He was a man who believed in data, in EEGs and MRI scans. My chart screamed, minimal brainstem activity. He was here to confirm what was on the paper, not to believe in miracles. He performed the standard neurological exam with a detached, almost bored efficiency. Then he began the communication test. His questions were flat, devoid of the emotion Sarah and Dr. Evans had used to help me. Spike your heart rate now. The command was cold, clinical. I tried. I thought of Mark, of the accident, of his hand on the switch. But my fear was now tangled up with a desperate need to perform, and the anxiety was making it harder to focus. My heart rate climbed, but only to 110. It was a weak, unconvincing spike. Unimpressive, Dr. Thorne muttered, making a note on his clipboard. Could easily be an anomaly. He continued, bring your heart rate to baseline. I tried to find my calm place, the glassy lake, but my mind was a churning sea of panic. What if I couldn't do it? What if he didn't believe me? The numbers hovered around 100, refusing to drop back to the 80s. Inconsistent, he noted. The patient is unable to reliably control her autonomic responses. He was dismissing me. He was siding with Mark. Every beat of my stubbornly elevated heart was another nail in my coffin. He was going to write in his report that I was unresponsive, that my communication was a fiction created by wishful hospital staff. The judge would grant Mark's motion. He would take me, and he would finish the job. Dr. Thorne packed his bag, his face impassive. He had seen what he came to see. I had failed. Desperation, pure and absolute, clawed at me. This was my last chance. I had to do something he couldn't dismiss. I couldn't move my finger, my eyes, my lips. But Sarah's words from that first night echoed in my head. Your autonomic nervous system is still working. Your heart rate, your breathing, it reacts to things. My breathing. The ventilator was set to a steady rhythm, 10 breaths per minute. A gentle mechanical whoosh. Pause, whoosh. Pause. But I still had my diaphragm, my own useless lungs. The machine was doing the work, but the muscles were still mine. What if I could fight it? As Dr. Thorne turned to leave, I focused all my will, every last shred of my being, on the muscles in my chest and abdomen. The machine pushed air in. Hold it. I clenched my diaphragm, fighting the machine's programming to exhale. I held the breath for a second, then 2, then 3. The machine, sensing the resistance, the unexpected pressure, suddenly blared an alarm. A loud, piercing shriek filled the room. Red lights flashed on the ventilator. Obstruction, high pressure. Dr. Thorne froze, his hand on the doorknob. He spun around, his eyes wide, staring at the screaming machine. He looked at the readouts, then at my face, my utterly still, placid face, and in my eyes, he saw it. The one thing he hadn't seen before, the one thing I had finally managed to show him: defiance. The obstruction alarm shrieked through the sterile silence, a sound of glorious, deliberate rebellion. It wasn't a gentle fluctuation on a monitor. It was a blaring, undeniable act of will. Dr. Thorne stood rooted to the spot, his cynical composure completely shattered. He stared at the ventilator, then at me, the connection clicking into place behind his cold, analytical eyes. This wasn't a malfunction. This wasn't a random spasm. This was a prisoner rattling the bars of her cage. "Stop!" he commanded, his voice sharp, but not to me. To the nurse, who was rushing forward to check the tubes, "Don't touch anything. Just watch." He walked slowly back to my bedside, his gaze locked on the ventilator's display, which was still flashing its angry red warning. "Elena," he said. His tone completely changed. It was no longer dismissive or clinical. It was filled with a dawning, electrifying curiosity. "Release the breath." I did. I let go of the tension in my diaphragm, and the machine expelled the air with a loud whoosh. The alarm immediately fell silent. The room was quiet again, save for the steady rhythm of the ventilator, now back on its programmed course. Dr. Thorne let out a slow, deliberate breath, mirroring the machine. "In all my years," he whispered, more to himself than to me, "I have never... do it again." And so, I did. On the next inhalation, I fought the machine, holding the air captive in my lungs. The alarm screamed. The red lights flashed. "Release!" he commanded. I obeyed. The alarm stopped. We did this 4 more times, a call and response between a doctor and his unresponsive patient. It was our own bizarre, beautiful duet. It was irrefutable. It was a muscle, a physical action controlled by my mind. It was proof. Dr. Thorne didn't say another word to me. He simply packed his briefcase, his movements precise and purposeful now. As he reached the door, he turned back, and for the first time, his granite-carved face softened into something that looked almost like a smile. "You, Mrs. Davies," he said, his voice resonating with newfound respect, "are a fighter." Then he was gone. The wait for his report was excruciating. Mark's lawyers were already crowing to the media, preemptively declaring victory and decrying the torture their client's wife was being subjected to. The day of the hearing arrived, a gray, foreboding morning. I couldn't be there, of course. I could only lie in my bed with Sarah holding my hand, her knuckles white as we waited for news. Sarah kept a news feed open on her phone, giving me a quiet play-by-play. They're in the courtroom. Mark is there with Jessica. He looks so sad and noble, the bastard. The judge is reading Thorne's report now. The silence stretched on. I could feel my own heart rate begin to climb with anxiety, and this time I did nothing to stop it. Then Sarah gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered. She read from her phone, her voice trembling with triumph. Dr. Thorne's report concludes in no uncertain terms that the patient, Elena Davies, is not only fully conscious and aware, but has developed 2 distinct and repeatable methods of communication. His final medical opinion states that any attempt to remove her from her current care or to place her medical decisions in the hands of her husband, Mark Davies, would be, quote, "a catastrophic and potentially fatal dereliction of duty." The judge has denied Mark's motion. All of it. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, and for the first time in months I felt my own eyes well up, a hot, stinging sensation. I couldn't cry, not really, but the emotion was overwhelming, a tidal wave of relief that left me shaking. We had won. The fortress walls had held. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Dr. Thorne's report, combined with my testimony, was a bomb dropped on Mark's carefully constructed narrative. Detective Miller, armed with a new ironclad arrest warrant, didn't wait. They picked Mark up that afternoon, walking him out of his lawyer's office in handcuffs in front of a ravenous pack of news cameras. His face, stripped of its noble mask, was a portrait of pure, snarling rage. Jessica was nowhere to be seen. The trial was a media circus. My testimony was the centerpiece. They brought a ventilator and heart monitor into the courtroom, and through a live video feed, I answered the prosecutor's questions. I told them everything in my own silent language of beeps and alarms. I told them about the plan for the cottage, the life insurance, the whispered threat at my bedside. Sarah's video, once questioned, was now the damning visual proof of my testimony. Sarah herself was a star witness, calm and unshakable on the stand. Dr. Thorne's expert testimony sealed it, explaining to the jury in meticulous detail how my impossible communication worked. Mark's defense crumbled. His lawyers tried to paint me as a vengeful wife, somehow faking my own locked-in state. But the idea was so preposterous it was laughed out of court. Jessica, his alibi and character witness, flipped on him in exchange for immunity, tearfully admitting he had told her I would be gone soon and that they would be rich. The verdict came after only 3 hours of deliberation. Guilty. Attempted murder. Solicitation. Insurance fraud. The judge, in his sentencing, called Mark's actions a crime of monstrous cruelty and profound betrayal. He was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. I watched it all on the small television in my room. When they led him away in chains, he looked directly into the camera, just as he had at the press conference. But this time, there was no smile. There was only the hollow, empty eyes of a man who had lost everything. My life, after, was a study in slow, painful progress. With the world now knowing I was in there, everything changed. The best neurologists and physical therapists in the country came to work with me. We established more complex communication systems, first using the ventilator to tap out letters in Morse code. Then, after months of grueling therapy, I regained the slightest flicker of movement in my left eyelid. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. It was a tiny movement, almost imperceptible. But to me, it was like running a marathon. It was a voice. My voice. Sarah remained my fiercest advocate and my best friend. Dr. Evans became my primary neurologist, always pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible. With my newfound ability to communicate, I made my wishes clear. I filed for divorce. I had Mark's name stripped from my own. I was no longer Elena Davies. I was Elena Volkov once more, reclaiming the name my parents gave me. I used the money from our settlement and the insurance policy he had tried to kill me for to set up a foundation for other patients with locked-in syndrome, to fund research, and provide the kind of cutting-edge communication technology that was giving me my life back. I never did get the cottage by the lake. That dream was tainted, part of a life that no longer existed. My world is still small, circumscribed by the 4 walls of a room. But it's not a prison anymore. It's a command center. From my bed, I write. Using a special computer that tracks my eye movements, I am telling my story. The whole story. I hear the steady, rhythmic beep, beep, beep of my heart. The gentle, mechanical whoosh of my lungs. They are the sounds of my survival, the sounds of my victory. They are the sounds of me here, alive and screaming my truth to the world, no longer trapped in the silence. And this time, everyone can hear me.